Hey guys, this is Dan Pope and this is Mike Cerbus from Power Monkey Fitness. We're coming at you from Power Monkey Camp number 7, and today we want to go over the snatch. So we're going to tag team this a little bit. So Mike over here is a fantastic coach and Olympic lifter, and he's going to break down all the pieces of the snatch, which I think is going to be phenomenal for you guys. We want to know what areas we need mobility, what areas we need stability, what areas are important from an injury prevention standpoint, and we're going to go through each joint by joint as far as how we would put this into a really nice warm-up for you guys. What do you think, Mike? Good? All right, very good. So the joints that I'm thinking about when you're trying to get better at snatching are going to be from the top down, the wrist. So when I'm snatching, I have a wide grip. I need to be able to relax my wrist this way and also inward because I have a barbell, okay? Moving down the chain, generally the elbow needs to be nice and stable here. We don't generally do much as far as a warm-up perspective, but the shoulder, on the other hand, does need more mobility. So the pecs are important, the lats are important, the position of the shoulder blade is important, as well as your thoracic spine. So if I don't have very good motion in my thoracic spine when I try to snatch, my bar is going to come forward. I'm going to default to a bad position. If I can get more motion here, great, I'm more upright. This is going to be a bit safer. All right. The other piece we don't think about from a shoulder perspective is if I'm snatching, when I start, and Mike is going to go over this, I need to internally rotate my shoulders a little bit when I start, and then as the bar comes up, I need to stay relatively internally rotated to keep the bar close to me and to keep my shoulders safe, all right? So we're going to go over a few mobilizations and warm-ups for that. The other piece that we need to have when you're in a deep squat for an overhead squat is going to be hip mobility and ankle mobility, all right? If I'm not mobile in these areas, let's say I can't sink down deep into a squat, I'm not going to be able to get my arms overhead, but if I can get into a better position, a little bit deeper, all of a sudden it's easier for me to get my arms overhead. All right, guys, so the first thing we're going to focus on are the wrists. I have a couple mobilizations I like to use. A couple things you can do that we're not going to go over are some foam rolling for the forearm musculature here. Sometimes you have a hard time extending the wrist because of the muscles right here. So spending some time foam rolling that is pretty good. The other area is going to be the joint, and we're going to go over a few mobilizations for that. What I like to start with is my hand facing sideways, and I take the web space in my opposite hand. I'm going to put that directly into my joint. So from here, I'm forcing my hand down into the floor as I pull up lightly with my other arm. I don't know if you guys can see that, but there's just a little bit of a gapping that's going on within the joint right in this area. And I just do this about 10 to 15 times. Once I get that done, I will gap and bend. Gap and bend. And I'll do that again for another 5 or 10, all right? The other piece is that when I'm snatching, I also want to have mobility here when I catch the barbell. So I'll turn my wrist a bit and do the same thing. Press down here, pull up a few times, and then I'll try coming in, all right? The other piece I like to do is to work on some of the flexibility of these muscles here. So you can take the hands and the thumb and just stretch everything out here. Mike and I were just doing about 45 minutes worth of arms. I'm doing arms every single day, so I'm a little stiff in this area. And then just make sure that you hit both of these sides, all right? After you finish that up, we like to do a specific loading sequence for the joint. So we start hands down. I like to turn my elbow pits this way because that's the same as externally rotating at the shoulder, and it's the same position we need when we're going to snatch. And I just go forward about 5 to 10 times, loosening up the wrists, and then I'll also take my hands and face them this way and come forward a few times that way. All right? Again, because we need to have motion here when I snatch, but I also need to have motion here. All right? After you finish up with the wrist mobilizations, the next things we need are going to be overhead mobility up here. We're also going to need relative shoulder external rotation. So this is external rotation. We want to catch the barbell, wrist extended, externally rotate the shoulders, arm fully overhead, nice relaxed position. So we need to have good mobility in some of the musculature through here, all right? A little bit in the pecs, on the sides, and also good motion in the upper back. So I'll give you a few exercises I like to do for that. First one is nice and easy. I'm sure most of you guys have done it. We take the roller, it goes into your mid-back. Take the arms, it goes behind the head. And from here, when you blow out, you want to make sure your ribs go down and your back extends over the roller. So if I just allow my ribs to pop up, I'm not getting much mobility where I want it. I'm getting it more in my lower back. So you want to be strict. We go breath in, blow out, ribs stay down. I just felt my back crack a little bit. Another breath, blow out. A little bit more. After about 3 to 5 breaths, we move up a touch. Same thing. Breath in, blow out, relax. Breath in, blow out, relax. Sink a little deeper. You can also get a peanut and work your way up a little higher. Once you get higher, With a foam roller, you don't have as much weight pressing you down, so the mobilization is not as great. But if you grab a peanut, sometimes that's helpful for this area to work that a bit more, all right? The other thing I like to do is some soft tissue work for the lats in this area. My general recommendation is to do about 30 seconds per muscle group. About 10 passes along the muscle is about sufficient. What I do for the lat is I start with the foam roller, it goes in your armpit, and I'm going down to the bottom part of my shoulder blade. Now the lats go all the way down to the back. It's just it feels terrible to try to roll your roller down your rib cage. We'll stop right here, and through this area is where the teres major lives, which is a major limiter of overhead motion. So we get a lot of bang for a buck for these exercises. So I do 5 passes where my shoulders are level, like this, trying to reach overhead. You can put your hand behind your back, which will give you a little stretch into external rotation. After 5, roll forward a little bit. Same thing, another 5 here. And then I scoot backwards, I do another 5. All right? That ends up being about 30 seconds. It's a piece of cake. All right? You can try to do your pec a little bit in this position. So same thing, arms here, I'm stretched out, and I do the same thing. I do about 30 seconds right in this area. Okay? Easy peasy, piece of cake. Once I finish up with that, I want a few exercises to put it together as far as my overhead mobility goes. So I'm going to try to take my hands, put them on the floor. I'm going to get in a push-up position, keep my knees bent. I'm going to pull my chest down towards my toes. This way I'm actively mobilizing my upper back, but reinforcing good overhead position. All right? About 5 to 10 reps, just like this. The other thing we want to try to reinforce besides overhead motion is external rotation. This is a great drill for it because it works external rotation of the shoulder as well as extension of the upper back. So we go forearms together, hand behind the head. I'm going to actively push my elbow down to the ground. I look at my elbow on the other side and I reach up to the ceiling as far as possible and back and forth. All right, if I had my arms straight, it's pretty much my snatch position. And I just do 5 per side, just like this. All right, so there's a couple really good ones you can do for your upper body, going overhead and externally rotating. The other piece I wanted to cover real quick was trying to get your internal rotation here, so you can get the bar with close to your chest and keeping the elbows a little bit more high outside on the way up. So the major limiters as far as muscles go for internal rotation is going to be the back side of the shoulder blade. Let me show you real quick how I like to hit these. This is great because you can hit this a lot of times right after you do your lats. So when you're here working on the lats, and you lean back a little bit, you're getting the back side of the lat. If you go a little further, all of a sudden, you're on the back of your shoulder blade. And you can very easily just roll this here, okay? And just to show you real quick where I'm at, if I turn around, you can feel this bumpy, bony ridge, the shoulder blade. We're sitting right below that. So we're trying to get the meat right here. A lot of times this is very, very tender, so you'll know if you're on that. And it's very quick and easy to hit right after you do the lats. So after you've worked a little bit on the soft tissue, I like to try to stretch that area. There's a couple options. One really easy one is just to sink the shoulder back, take your elbow, pull it towards your chest. To make this a little more effective, when you breathe in, you can push a little bit against my arm here, holding it in place, blow out, relax deeper into the stretch, okay? Do about 7 breaths, there's 30 seconds. The other one I like a lot is a variation of a sleeper stretch. So a lot of people get a painful pinch in the front of the shoulder when they do that. If you get that, this is not the right exercise for you. Okay, I don't like to do it in this position. I like to lean back a bit. This is generally a little safer on the shoulder. And then from here, palm down towards the floor. And you should be feeling a pull in the back of the shoulder. If you're not, then it's not the right exercise for you. You can try the same contract, relax. So breath in, push, blow out, relax. Breathe in, push, blow out, and relax. Just getting a little deeper with each one, okay? So if you want an exercise to try to focus on how to use that range of motion, you can do some high pulls, or you can just focus on doing this motion here without the shoulder popping forward, okay? So that pretty much sums up the upper body. Next, you want to move on to the lower body. So when I get deep into a squat, the main places where I'm generally limited are going to be in the hips, okay? And the 2 main spots where we want to focus on are going to be some of the adductor muscles through here, and also the backside or the butt right here. And I'll show you some quick and easy ways to roll this out. Again, it's about 30 seconds per muscle group. You don't have to go crazy. As far as intensity, a lot of the research is showing that we're going to your pain threshold. We're not trying to blow through a whole bunch of pain. Just go to the point where it's a bit uncomfortable and work there. I'm just rolling back and forth. I go from the knee all the way to the groin. Again, 30 seconds. or about 10 passes. After that, I want to focus on the back side of the hip. Pretty easy to do that here. So I'm just rolling right through this area, back and forth, same thing. 10 passes, 30 seconds. If you want to make it a bit of a stretch, you can take this foot and loop it on top. Again, just so you guys can see, the muscles we're trying to hit are here to here, here to here, right in this global area. All right? After we've done a few foam rolls, now we can do a few stretches. Here's one of my favorites. I'm going to do this from an angle so you can see. So I'm trying to mobilize my left hip. So from here, I'm going to go right leg straight back, windshield wipe this foot so that's enough that I can block it with my other leg. Make sure this knee is right underneath your hip. From here, pretend like you have a glass of wine in your low back. You don't want to spill any, so I'm going to go directly to the left, and I should feel a bit of a pull right in my butt here. I shouldn't feel any painful pinch in the hip, and if I do, just try to go a little bit further this way. And if that doesn't clear the pinch, just don't do this stretch, okay? Once you get that pull, you sit back lightly. It should intensify the stretch. And the last piece is take your forearm across your body, down on the floor. You should feel a nice pull here. I tell people it should feel like this bone here is poking out your butt right through here. And then you breathe and relax. So breath in, blow out, sing it to the stretch. About 30 seconds, 7 breaths, whatever you like. All right. After you mobilize this area, we work onto the adductor or groin musculature. So from here, hands and knees, take this leg directly out to the side. Should be even with your knee, and then start to inch out until you start to feel a bit of a pull. Once you get that pull, forearms down, you still have that glass of wine in your lower back, don't spill it, and then push backwards. You have a couple options. You can either rock back and forth, or you can hang out here, and every time you blow out, sink deeper to the stretch. Breath in, blow out, deeper into the stretch, just like that. If you need more stretch, go a little bit closer to this leg, or get a little bit wider, all right? You'll feel this one if you're restricted there for sure though, okay? So the next area I wanted to look at a bit is going to be the ankle. We're going to mobilize the ankle a little bit, and then we'll do a few put it all together type movements. From here, take the roller, nice and easy to mobilize the calf. I like to spend the majority of my time towards the lower part, my lower leg, just because you can really directly hit the soleus muscle here, whereas as you go higher, you're hitting more of the gastroc. When I'm in a deep squat here, my gastroc is actually, it's on slack, whereas the soleus is not. So in a deep squat, it's usually the soleus that limits your range of motion. So from here, it's same thing, about 30 seconds per side, nice and easy, back and forth. I like to go toe straight up, toe out, and toe in. That way we're just being comprehensive and hitting the entire muscle, okay? After you mobilize a bit, then I like to do a quick stretch. So let's head over here to the rack. Real basic soleus stretch. We just take the toe up, heel goes down, just like so. And then what we're trying to do is drive that knee towards your little toe, okay? Little toe or second toe, we just like to mobilize in the same position we want to squat in. So I do the same thing. When I breathe in, I may push a little bit against this post. When I blow out, relax you a little further. Breath in, push, blow out, reach my knee a little bit more, okay? After you finished up here, you can take your knee off the wall and just do a few mobilizations. Nice and easy. I tell people somewhere between 10 and 25 at the top end, back and forth, all right? After we've mobilized the ankle as well as the hip, I like to use a few exercises to put together that mobility. So we'll go into a squat position. I'll reach down and grab the toes, and then from here, we're trying to actively pull the hips down towards the heels, okay? And I'm gonna try to utilize my hip flexibility I just created as well as my ankle mobility. So I'm actually trying to compress my body down towards my heels, which Mike will talk about a bit later. Come back up again, pull right back down. If you have an athlete that has a hard time keeping their knees out and they're a little tight in the adductors, you can tell them to press out a bit. I'm actively trying to get my chest up as I go. Come back up again, and back down. Nothing you can do in this position is you can start reaching, okay? We talked about overhead flexibility being important, external rotation being important, reaching up as far as you can. We can go right arm, and we can go left arm, reaching up overhead, external rotating, pulling back. You can do both at the same time, trying to get upright, overhead, and then finish your snatch. From there, you're pretty much ready to go. You can do a few goblet squats, overhead squats with the bar, whatever it is, but from this part, I'm gonna let Mike take over and show you guys how to actually snatch.
All right, guys, we're gonna try and build from a lot of what Dan Pope did with the mobility and get into some of the positions of snatching. One of the things that I've noticed when people are snatching is they're not very conscious of how their body's setting up, whether it's in positions of the pull or positions of support overhead. Snatching can be very simple, but there's also a lot of complexity in terms of the joints that are vulnerable when you're snatching. So I want to go over more of a basic view of what I'm thinking about structurally when I'm setting up for the snatch. That way I can guarantee that I'm limiting the chance for injuries and extra stress on my body, and also increasing the potential to move a lot of weight or a little bit of weight within a lot of intensity. So within a workout over and over and over again without beating up and adding unnecessary stress to the specific parts of my body. So the first thing we're going to look at with the barbell is just simply going to be overhead support. So how do I support the barbell overhead? The pieces that you're going to look at on me are going to be my shoulders, my elbow, and my wrist. So when I go to overhead, what I want to see is that somebody has a pretty neutral shoulder, and by neutral I mean it should be a comfortable position, and then they're externally rotating their arm. All right, so some of the cues you hear when people are lifting are squeeze your shoulder blades together, tear the bar apart, all these different things that in my mind make it more complex than it needs to be. If I lock out overhead and I extend all of my joints, so my elbows are locked out aggressively, my wrists are extended, and then my shoulders are open, I'm in a good position overhead that I can hold weight for a long time and not develop any imbalances in my shoulders. The other piece that I'm looking at is from the side. I want the barbell to be over the crown of my head, and I want to be in a comfortable neutral position, all right? I don't want to have an excessive overextension. I don't want to be driving my head through the bar and adding all this stress into my body that can develop some imbalances over time. So essentially I'm trying to stack a lot of my positions and feel very similar to what a handstand would feel like. One of the pieces we're going to look at now with the overhead squat is what happens as I go down into the bottom. Ideally, the barbell stays on the same line throughout the overhead squat. So if you watch the head of the bar when I'm squatting, it should stay on this line as I go down into the squat. What happens a lot of time is the compensation of, oh, I have tight shoulders, so I need to lean and push back. And now my elbows and my wrists and my shoulders and even my low back are starting to feel all the stressors that if I would just turn my body into a comfortable position overhead and force a little bit of upward pressure, I can maintain that same position that I have right here. All right, so in terms of objectives with the barbell, that's what I'm trying to build in an overhead squat. Is not only a strength in that position, but more so an awareness. So if you're not thinking about those components when you're supporting the barbell overhead, you're not allowing yourself to build strength in those positions. So just taking it back down to a barbell and then going through your warm-up as you progressively get heavier, you should be kind of self-assessing what's happening with your shoulder, what's happening with your elbow, what's happening with your wrist. If you feel something that's a little bit limited or stressed, then you need to take that rewind back down to some of the drills that Dan was going over, pay a little bit of extra attention to those drills. All right. All the pieces we've talked about so far are kind of what's happening with your upper body, supporting the weight. I want to touch quickly on the lower half of my body, and that really comes down to the quality of squat that you have. So if your overhead squat feels and looks different in your lower body from your back squat and your front squat, you have an issue. So when we talk about overhead squatting, I want to think more of the synergy that goes in between your back squat, your front squat, all the squat variations that you're practicing. Those should be going hand in hand with what you're trying to accomplish in a snatch or your overhead squat. So if you look at my positioning in the overhead squat, foot placement is going to be a little bit outside the hips, like shoulder width. I'm going to turn out to a degree of comfort. So depending on your tightness, that degree of turnout in your feet is going to be a little different. I'm more concerned with the integrity of your shoulders. So get in a position that's comfortable to be able to maintain your position overhead. Now when I'm in the bottom position, what I'm trying to do is remain balanced in the midfoot, all right? I don't want to rock back too far in my heels because then my compensation is either pushing the bar forward or leaning through to counterbalance. I want to keep everything nice and centered so that my toes are still in contact with the ground, my feet are flat, and then my knees are actually pushing out to give me the tension necessary to stay vertical and upright in my overhead squat. When I'm working with an athlete or when I'm warming myself up, once I feel comfortable with how my overhead is for the day, or once I feel comfortable with how somebody's moving in an overhead squat, we're gonna progress into how you support the bar in your pulling positions. I think I have a little bit of a different approach in terms of what you're thinking. So when we talk about overhead squats, we talk about being externally rotated. I think of that more so in my elbow than in my shoulder. So my shoulder can stay very neutral, but I can move my elbow into a lot of different positions. So overhead, I want my elbow to be externally rotated, and then I'm supporting the weight. Now when I go into a pulling position, I want my shoulder to stay neutral, but I want my elbow to be internally rotated. So I want to be in this position when I'm pulling, as opposed to what I see as a common error is somebody flexing back and pulling the barbell back, which actually gets the bar away from your body. So it's kind of a counterproductive tension. I want to get a more balanced tension, and I'll talk a lot about it should feel like a lat spread. So I'm trying to flex my lats and have a big chest and back while everything's staying very flat to the body, okay? The easiest thing you can do visually to see that is if I have my arms relaxed and then I tense back, my hands go away from my body. So for me to get the barbell close, I'm gonna have to pull early with my arms. So if you have an issue with early arm bending, you're an athlete with an issue with early arm bending, take a look at their setup. If I set neutral with my arms, then I flare my lats out and I internally rotate my arms, now all of a sudden the bar is really tight to my body. So when I think about pulling, it's initiated through the shoulders, up the body, and then straight into my overhead position. So that's what we're gonna be looking at with the barbell as we cycle through all these positions, that stays consistent throughout. So if I grab the barbell and I just set up from the top position of my snatch, I should look similar to what I was just talking about. My shoulders should be pretty neutral, but if you look at the outsides of my elbows, they should line up with the barbell. They should not pull back and break the barbell. That position right there is promoting a horizontal movement with the bar that when you start extending and getting aggressive with weights is gonna loop the bar around in your pull. So if I set up more neutral, elbows lining up with the bar, shoulders staying here, when I finish my pull, the bar is going to be able to sequence up and then into that overhead squat with very limited movement on a horizontal plane. I want to keep everything as vertical as possible. Now when I go into more of a high hang position, what I'm trying to watch is that the head of the barbell is going to stay on a straight line as opposed to any type of leaning, which is going to get the bar rocking from forward to backwards, okay? So in my high hang position, what I'm trying to do is maintain my constant tension, sit into a power position, and then from here, if I were to snatch, it should be a very quick movement that stays close to the body. When I go lower into the hang, now I'm still holding the same tension in my upper body. As I get all the way to above the knee, the bar should still be on the same line that it was on. That way when I transfer back to the hip, I'm still in my strong position, and then I would be able to snatch from that position. Once you're starting to feel all that constant tension in the hang, what I'm more focused on than anything is that you're building an awareness of how to maintain the tension and then find the different positions that you need to be cycling through when you're snatching. So again, this snatch is not necessarily me trying to teach you how to initially get to a maximum weight. I want to see an athlete be able to demonstrate an awareness and an understanding of the smaller positions you need to get into. Once you do that, then it's easy for us to progress into actual training within the snatch and working on complexes and higher percentage training. Right now, I just want to see an awareness with the barbell. So if I get set back up from the top, I want to go through a little overview of just the positions I should be hitting when I snatch. So at extension, I like to see all of my athletes being able to balance in this position and hold. That way when they do snatch and they transition under, it's a quick movement that you don't have to think about. So the only thing I'm thinking about is reaching tall in extension. At that point, what happens with my body, if it gets some lean back, whatever individual tendency there is can be more of a reaction as opposed to something that's forced. So I'm always thinking as extension as a vertical movement that I'm trying to get to at the end of my lift. If I cycle into my hip position that we went over a little bit ago, I'm keeping the same tension. Now when I go to the knee, same tension. If I go down into my start position, all I'm doing is sitting into this position, and I should have the same tension that I just had everywhere else. Okay, so this is something I'm consciously thinking about every setup that I have in the snatch. If you're not thinking about that, that's something I want you to rewind into when you're starting to learn how to snatch or when you're working some snatch technique or snatch drills. So if we take the bar again, cycle through the positions, we're going to go an understanding and awareness of extension. So that's my top position. I've got my power position from the hip. I've got my hang position from the knee. And then I've got my start position. Another thing that I'm thinking about in all these positions is where's my focal point? I should have a constant focal point. That way, as I cycle back through positions, it's a constant variable that I can manage. And then snatch from. So this might seem very repetitive and very basic, but these are the pieces of the snatch that get overlooked. A lot of times you can't call on a position because you haven't felt it or you haven't spent time in it. So what I try to do when I'm teaching the snatch is start to begin with an awareness of all these positions. After we've got an awareness of these positions, we can move on to more complex pieces, higher weights, complexes, different training strategies. But this is the foundation of how I like to teach the snatch. We're working on support strength, then we're going into some positional awareness and still how to support the weight. And then from there, we'll progress onward and onward and onward. All right?